Welcome to Power Up Recovery with Nutrition. It is time to make nutrition part of the conversation. I'm your host, Christina Veselak, and I'm so glad you're here. Did you know that it's our brain's job to allow us to cope with stress gracefully? But to do that, it needs to be fed optimally. Have you ever wondered why so many committed people relapse or maybe even die? Why so many people on psychotropic medication still feel lousy and still have cravings? What if the missing piece is food, the right food? What if the right nutrients like amino acids or even eating protein every 4 hours could actually balance your brain chemistry and your mood without medication and support lasting recovery? In this podcast, we explore the powerful connection between feeding your brain well, mental health, relapse, and recovery from addiction. We will share insights from experts, inspiring recovery stories, and practical strategies you can use today. Whether you're in recovery, a healthcare professional, or someone passionate about emotional well being, this show is for you. Let's dive in and discover how fueling your body and brain with the right food, the right amino acids, and other key nutrients can fuel your transformation today. Welcome. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Power Up Recovery with Nutrition. I am Christina Veselak, your host, and I'm delighted to have you all with us. And I'm also delighted to be speaking with Suze Kenney today. Suze and her husband Dave are from Canada, and they have a long history of using a brain-based approach for addiction recovery. And Suze especially focuses on the nutritional side of things. She'll be speaking at our upcoming conference, Feed the Recovering Brain, in Columbus, Ohio, in April and May 2025, which of course is also available by recording. So, Suze, welcome.
Thanks so much, Christina. It's a pleasure to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what your passion is for this work?
Yeah. So to begin with, I'm going to say we stumbled into this. So you introduced Dave, and we became life partners. And then shortly after that, became business partners because we had this incredible idea that the brain drives all behavior. And so if people were struggling with behaviors that they didn't want, it just made a lot of sense to us that the brain had to be involved in those decisions. So that sparked a conversation. We were living in Wilcox, Saskatchewan at the time, which is population 300. So I don't expect anybody's ever heard of it.
Tiny little town.
Yeah, and we were working at a private residential school that focused around sports, particularly hockey. And what we noticed is when the kids were struggling, so this is high school age, there wasn't any look at lifestyle. It was just here. The nurse would say, go to the doctor. The doctor would say, here, take some medication. And most of the kids, we watched them either disappear, so their character evaporated, or the very worst scenario was they were no longer able to function. They weren't sleeping, they weren't socializing, and then eventually they would have to go home because they weren't interacting at the school.
Sure.
So that was our conversation when Dave and I saying there's something terribly wrong. Like, yeah, kids should, it's been pretty normal to struggle when you're a teenager, but
Right.
the way that it was being approached and just not asking about lifestyle, not asking about, how do you feel about things? It was just here, have a prescription and that.
Right.
So that's where it came up. That's where we came up with the idea that the brain has to be involved in any type of recovery. And that was the beginning. That was the inception of that.
Now, we kind of think it's common sense, don't we?
Mhm. Yep,
It seems to me to be absolutely obvious that the brain itself is
yeah,
the driver of behavior, but also an out of balance brain, whatever that means, is going to be a
right,
driver of out of balance behavior. And
right,
that lifestyle, what we feed the brain, our
absolutely,
exercise, our sleep, our physical environment is going to dramatically and directly
right.
impact brain health and therefore mood and behavior.
Yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
so that was about 2008, 2009.
Huh?
We opened our first recovery program in the fall of 2011, kind of on a wing and a prayer. We
Yeah.
um, we said, okay, if this doesn't work, we're going to have to be living at home in our parents' basement. So we have to make it work because
Uh-huh.
that wasn't an option.
Yeah.
And we put everything into it. We said, we believe in this so strongly that we invested everything that we had. And lo and behold, within a couple of weeks of us opening, we were seeing remarkable changes
Yes.
in people that were coming. So just unplugging them. We didn't at our program, there was no TV. There was specific movies that we would watch that would help people rise in vibration.
Mm-hmm.
The food was amazing. Over the years, we were in for 13 years. So over the years, we made some transitions, and I know you want to talk about that in terms of food. And it was really a lifestyle oriented program. So we taught people how a brain works, we taught people how a brain thrives. And lo and behold, they were able to replicate things then when they went home.
Yes. People have to be taught this, or they're
Right,
going to default to their old behavior.
right.
Yeah.
And we engaged the families too.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that was parents or a spouse or whoever the significant people were, we coached with them while the person was with us on property, because there's also a lot of blame and a lot of shame and a lot of misunderstanding when people don't understand that it's the brain and not the person's willpower or character for
That's
the
right.
most part, right? I mean, there's always some people that, they can be a little hard to get along with, but for the
Uh-huh.
most part, the brain is driving that behavior. And so to be able to teach and coach the families saying, look, you're going to have a new person coming home. And so this has to be a new, fresh beginning.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be, if there were things at home that need to be repaired, if there's food that needs to be purchased before they arrive home, this is a new beginning. And we didn't call it a graduation, we called it Vita Nova Diem, which means new beginnings day.
Nice. I like it.
So yeah, when this is your new beginning, you get a clean start.
What I really like about that is that it is holistic in the true sense of the word.
Very
So many programs say they're holistic, but they leave out huge
right.
pieces, especially food and feeding the brain what it needs to thrive.
Right. We had accountants, Christina, that when we first started, they said, there's no way you can be spending this much on food. And we said, yeah, actually we did. Come for lunch. Come up and you can sample. We had 3 full-time chefs. We had a team of 26. And we actually taught people how to cook in the kitchen too. So we had a robust program, so much so what the offshoot of that was, here's the unintended consequence of teaching people how to cook, is their confidence level went up in every other way, which we
Yes.
didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
But I think fundamentally, when you can feed yourself, when you can take care of yourself, then all of a sudden things aren't overwhelming anymore. And that's what we found. So much so too that a lot of our graduates ended up going into culinary arts
Wow.
afterwards as a career. So
Nice.
very unexpected, but yeah,
But I think it's so important, Suze, because feeding ourselves is foundational self-care and
yes,
self-love,
right,
right? The way we're first loved as tiny little infants is through being fed.
right.
And we are supposed to carry that act on for ourselves
Yeah,
when we become teenagers and then adults.
right.
And so few people, especially in today's day and age, are prepared to do that, are taught how to love themselves with food, the real
Mhm,
way, not, comfort food, but
mhm,
how to feed their bodies and their brains and therefore their hearts
mhm.
food that support radiant life and
Yeah,
radiant well-being.
yeah.
So of
Christina,
course
you
it's
hit on
going to
it.
raise
It's
confidence.
living food. If you're eating living foods, it's going to give you life force energy.
Mm,
If you're eating ultra processed, so when I'm coming to the conference, one thing I make the distinction of is that there's a big difference between processed foods and ultra processed foods.
yes.
So we've been processing foods for millennia.
Yeah.
Human beings have been curing foods and, making it better for storage and longevity
Right.
and
Beef
enhancing
jerky is
flavors.
processed.
Right. And ultra processed foods have only been around for a short period of time, and they're commodity foods. They're based on profitability, and they have lots of ingredients but no nutrition. And they all kind of taste the same. So if people are addicted, that's dark science at work. That's exactly what is supposed to happen. Except that there's absolutely no nutrients in that for the brain. So then it goes back to what I said about the students at the high school that we were working at. If you're not feeding the brain, and it was a
Mm,
buffet lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but the kids weren't going for the fruits and they weren't going for the salads. They were going for the French fries, right? Or they were going
right.
for whatever, they're high school students. But over time, then the brain has nothing to function with, right? There's no nutrition at all. And so a big part of any recovery, whether that's health recovery, whether that is addiction recovery or mental health issues, grief is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
nurturing. And I love what you said, self-care begins with food.
Yes, it really
Mhm,
truly does. But the research, the scientific research on this goes back to like the 1920s,
mhm,
1930s, when pellagra became a thing. So
mm,
I was listening to a lecture last night about niacin.
mhm,
And when rice and wheat started getting purified, when the outer
mhm.
bran and the kernel was taken away,
Right,
and so people started eating white flour and white rice,
right,
this dreadful disease, pellagra,
right,
developed,
right.
which is dementia, dermatitis. I think there can also be delusion involved, and then death
Yeah. Yeah.
due
And
to the lack of niacin
right,
due to overprocessed food.
right. You don't want to mess with Mother Nature, right? She has a
No,
good formula.
yeah.
Everything
So,
that was the way it was supposed to be is meant to feed us, and our body recognizes those foods. And
yes.
so not a lot of people know about genetically modified seeds. So GMO is a big deal. And in Canada, we don't, I can't find a label on it to save my life. In the US, I know you're supposed to have legislation that is alerting people to a genetically modified. And for listeners that are watching this that don't know what that is, so they take a seed,
Hmm.
enhance it in a lab so that pests don't want it. It becomes a higher bred, which means there's a higher yield. So if that's wheat or soy or corn, it yields more. Again, it goes back to profitability.
Right.
But
Right.
our bodies don't recognize it either because the seed has been changed. So
Yes.
fruits and vegetables, soy, corn, wheat, most of it in ultra processed foods comes from a genetically modified source. So again, that's why people are struggling is because the body doesn't recognize. I personally, I will not eat anything genetically modified. And
Hmm.
my energy level
Hard to
is,
do.
yeah, yeah, it's just, so even we'll go shopping, Dave and I, and there's supposed to be labeling, like I said, but we'll often educate somebody who's working in the produce section saying, is this genetically modified? And they say, what is that? What do you mean? What's genetically modified? And so we educate them in the produce section, and they said, wow, we've never heard of that before. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. And we have to educate people in little bits, and hopefully it will spread out.
Right.
It will spread out. Well, this is why in our 5-star pro recovery diet, the
Mhm.
5th star is clean food.
Yeah.
Now, clean can mean a whole bunch of things,
Yeah.
but the reason why that's there is because it actually matters to our brain health and therefore
100%.
our emotional, not just our physical
Yeah.
well-being,
Yeah.
but our emotional well-being.
Physiology drives psychology. And
Yes, it
so for
does.
people that might be a new phrase for, but your physical body and how it functions and the homeostasis and the balance that it has with every organ, every cell, blood, tissue, nerves, drives psychology. So
Mhm.
if you're having mental illness challenges, or you just don't seem to be out of a funk, the number one thing to look at is physiology before you look at the psychology of it.
Before you look at psychology, this
Yeah.
is why we, Suze, talk about our three-legged stool:
Hmm.
biochemical, nutritional, psychosocial, and then spiritual.
Yes.
But if you don't have a functioning brain, it
Right.
becomes so much harder to
Right.
do the other two legs of the stool and the rest of
Right.
the work of recovery.
We say at CBT, people used to come to our program and say, do you do CBT? Do you do CBT? Right. It was a big catchphrase.
Yeah, I
And
still.
yeah, of course, everybody that changes anybody does cognitive behavioral therapy because you're trying to change behavior. But it's exactly what you just said, Christina. Unless you take into consideration the condition of the actual brain, how the
Mhm.
brain is functioning, and not chemistry. So there's this, we've been duped, right? Saying, oh, it's a chemical reaction in the brain. It's not. And it was debunked years and years ago, but
Well,
it's still one of those myths that gets passed around. But it's the function of the brain. So how your brain physically works, how the neurons fire, how everything processes drives chemistry. So chemicals are released, hormones are released when the brain is functioning well.
right. Well, I'm going to disagree with you very slightly there because the food we eat, right, the nutrients we eat are molecules, the amino acids, the vitamins, the minerals, and they
Right.
act as chemicals.
They,
So the
oh, that
brain,
is,
this
sorry,
huge
you're
chemical
absolutely right.
factory,
Yeah, I'm
starting
talking
with,
about the chemical imbalance theory. So telling
sure,
people that they're missing a chemical and here's the tablet you need to take in order to correct that.
that I
That's
agree
not
with you.
how a brain works. So the chemical imbalance theory was, it never did make sense. It was created by a pharmaceutical company. So many years ago, if listeners want to go back, the first commercial that ever came out for that was Zoloft. And it had this cute little fuzzy, almost a teardrop shaped, and you can find the commercial. And in the commercial, it says, if you're feeling da 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 and sad and all of these feelings, you may have a chemical imbalance.
Yeah,
And then it was born, right?
and
So
then
that
it was
was
born.
actually how it was a pharmaceutical company that introduced the idea of a chemical imbalance.
But what's so interesting here is that before Prozac was the first SSRI and then Zoloft, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor,
Yeah.
before that got created and sold to the public, psychiatrists and doctors and veterinarians, for that matter, were
Hmm.
using tryptophan,
Hmm.
which is an amino acid found in
Yeah.
food that turns into the brain neurotransmitter, brain chemical,
Yeah.
serotonin.
Right.
And people were very happy using tryptophan to relieve anxiety, to help with sleep, both in animals and in human beings.
Yeah.
And when the way the story I heard goes, when the pharmaceutical reps started contacting doctors saying, we have this wonderful new drug to support serotonin production in the brain, the doctor said, what we have works. What we
Mhm.
have works. Tryptophan works. We don't need you.
Right.
Well, somehow what happened next is that, and I don't think a lot of people know the story, is that one of the amino acid manufacturing companies in Japan, there were actually, I think, four of them, decided that they had too many filtering systems in their process.
Mm.
And so they removed one, maybe two, I can't remember all the details, but at least one filter from their production of tryptophan, releasing an impure batch of tryptophan into the market,
Mhm.
which killed some people, made other people ill. It actually paralyzed them.
Mm.
And the FDA in this country jumped in and said, ooh, this is dangerous. This is killing people and making people
Mm.
sick.
Right.
We need to withdraw it from the market to find out what's going on.
Right.
And the pharmaceutical company was right there saying, yes. And the week that tryptophan was removed from the market, Prozac was released onto the market. And so psychiatrists, I think, could still prescribe tryptophan, but it was no longer available over the market,
Right.
over the counter. But you could still buy it from a veterinarian supply company. And then it was, so they really had no recourse but to move over to Prozac.
Mm.
And then it was discovered what had happened. Well, then what happened is some enterprising person discovered that 5-HTP could be purified from the Graphonia plant, which grows in South Africa. So tryptophan turns into 5-HTP, turns into serotonin. And so they started selling 5-HTP over the counter. And then there was really no need to keep tryptophan away. They tested it. They realized tryptophan was perfectly safe when it's sufficiently manufactured and following the right safety protocols. And that's when it was returned to the market. But
Mm.
by then, of course, the SSRIs had a foothold.
Psychiatry back in the day used to be lifestyle oriented. So
Very lifestyle oriented. They
they were
understood.
asking, yeah, which is that's the way. Well, I think, and there's a lot we now teach coaches to be recovery coaches.
Mhm,
And there's a lot of people that are joining our program that are in the medical field. And I think there's a shift, right? The people went into those professions wanting to be able to help people with a genuine heart. And
mhm,
so it's been really interesting training psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, medical doctors
mhm,
that are saying, look, I want to work with people. I want the time to be able to ask questions.
mhm,
And I know that lifestyle is the solution, right? Before looking at anything else. So there is a shift happening.
mhm. So, what is the name of your training program if people want to become recovery coaches through you?
Mhm. So it's Emergo Academy. So Emergo is a Latin phrase. It means to rise above.
Mhm,
And so Emergo Academy, and we do a certification training for recovery coaches. So some people in the US, you call it peer support as well.
mhm. Yeah.
So we can do the certification for either. But yeah, when we decided that we didn't want to live with people anymore because we lived on property. So although we had a
Mhm,
really big team, we lived with people 24/7. Literally, one of us had to be on property. So Dave and I never took holidays together. We couldn't leave both at the same time. But the benefit of that, and I said we did it for 13 years, is we learned so much, because if you imagine a person goes to see somebody once or twice a week for an hour,
Mm-hmm.
they can, there's a honeymoon, right? You can say anything, but you live with somebody, and man, the honeymoon wears off quick. So if
Mm-hmm.
people would arrive Monday, we called it flak jacket day, kind of midweek,
Mm-hmm.
when they didn't have their vices anymore, when there wasn't other people that might be the rescuers in their
Okay.
lives, and they were having to actually do the work themselves. But there was something incredibly gratifying about seeing that. So people lived there for about 4 to 6 weeks,
Okay.
and the changes were like there were some miraculous things that we
Yeah.
saw. I was witness to. Our team, we saw miracles every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
In
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
people. And the greatest compliment that we ever had, if a new family arrived, because we had a rolling admission, so we had people arriving every Monday. And if we had a new family that arrived and they brought the person with them, they couldn't tell who the clients were and who our staff was, which was the greatest compliment, right?
Nice.
So nobody wore PJs. Like you got up and you dressed for the day.
Mm-hmm.
You participated in a specific schedule. So everybody who came had a very specific schedule, which was
Mm-hmm.
different than everybody else's, because everybody's at different stages of energy, different
Right.
stages in life. We had everything from incredibly famous people to people that, like the most of us, just regular mundane people,
Mm-hmm.
and all age groups, as long as they were adult. And
Nice.
everybody coexisted together. We had the most incredible environment. When you feed people incredibly well, when you focus on sleep, when you focus on the movement, and you begin to teach all of these basics, it was a utopia. And I know it's like a perfect world. And we had no outside intervention from news. We worked
Mm-hmm.
with a naturopathic doctor. We did vitamin IVs, and we were off property almost every day, because to us, we never wanted to create a false environment where people said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I can do it here, but what if I'm out in the quote unquote real world?
Right.
So every day they would be out doing things that they're going to do when they go at home. And on the weekends, we went out and had a lot of fun and had a very robust program. So people were tired by the time the nighttime came.
Sure.
They were ready to go to bed, because they put in
Yeah.
an incredible day of learning and doing.
So you mentioned vitamin IVs. What were in your IVs and what other nutraceuticals did you use?
Yeah, so very targeted. Our naturopathic doctor would meet with the client,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on what they reported as symptoms, that then it would be basically a vitamin C. Some might have an emphasis on glutathione, the B vitamins. So
Mm-hmm.
depending on what they were deficient in. And
Okay.
then I don't know if Linus Pauling and um, Dr. David Hawkins wrote a book, Orthomolecular Psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began studying
Good
that.
book.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
amazing book. And also Andrew Saul, and there's Dr. Abram Hoffer,
Mhm.
who
Who's
all,
Canadian?
yes, yeah, he worked out of Saskatchewan, very close to our little town that we lived in. And what we began to see, and over the 13 years, we changed things a lot. We perfected things so that we finally, by the end, we were pretty dialed in to how to help people recover very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you use amino acids at all, or just more like the vitamins and minerals and what other nutrients did you use?
So most of it came from food.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people that we had that came had problems swallowing, because again, which is brain related. So anybody that can't swallow, it's because the nervous system is so tight, the brain is so locked down. So over time, they would get better at being able to swallow tablets. But in the beginning, that's why we did the vitamin IVs.
Mm-hmm.
So the amino acid therapy for us just came from food because everything is
Right.
amino acid based. So we wanted, again, for people to be able to duplicate what we were doing at home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Right. So beginning and ending with food.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Food,
Yeah.
as Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food.
I like it.
Yeah.
In fact, I
And
love it.
yeah, that was a few thousand
Yes.
years ago. Go figure, right? Yeah.
Well, it kept the human race alive until now
Hmm.
and healthy and functional and able to,
Yeah.
ride horses and all sorts of things that some people have trouble doing today.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
you mentioned horses. One of the things that we talk about, Dave and I, if you owned a thoroughbred horse and
Hmm.
that horse was going to be in a race where you were going to win millions of dollars potentially, it's pretty
Yes.
easy to figure out. You'd feed that horse the absolute best diet. You'd make sure that it was cared for. You'd make sure that the environment was everything it could be, because potentially this horse is going to win you a lot of money. Well, we're only given one body.
That's right. That's right.
And so we are the thoroughbred.
We,
It's
we are the thoroughbred. But I'm
right.
also thinking about treatment programs,
Hmm.
Suze, and the fact that the people who run treatment programs and treatment program owners like you both are
Hmm.
responsible for the health of the thoroughbred and
Hmm.
the healing of the thoroughbred. And unfortunately, so many treatment program owners and clinic managers today do not realize that food is a therapeutic agent, is
100%.
crucial to therapeutic success,
Yeah.
and therefore needs to be made a priority in
Yeah.
terms of funding rather than being, well, I guess we have to feed people because we have to feed
Right.
people.
Well, it's
And
it's pennies a
give,
plate, right?
right,
Like
and give
we
people
had there
the
was we
lowest
had chefs that
quality
would come
food. Yeah,
and they were amazed. So chefs that might have worked in a big kitchen or in some sort of, they get all the packaged things delivered. So they would come to us and say, "Oh my gosh, we've never worked with ingredients like this. Like this is, oh wow, we're usually opening up a box." And they shared with us that it's pennies on the plate, right? They are the people that work in that environment are penalized if they spend over a certain amount of
right.
on a food budget.
That's right.
And
Of
for
course.
us, it was the number one. So we've never found another place that was operated like us. Like you said earlier, there was a lot of people that said, "Oh, it's holistic or it's brain first." And yes, we have great food. We never found another place like us that focused on what we did.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, congratulations. And it's too bad you're not existing the same
Well,
way you did, but now you're
that's why we
training.
wrote the book. So
Mhm.
we wrote our book last year. It became a bestseller. It's called Actualized Recovery. It's not
Mhm.
about 12 steps. Recovery is a brain thing, is the tagline. So a little cheeky. Because and not to bash 12 steps, it's that when 12 steps was created in the 1930s, there wasn't neuroscience, there wasn't social sciences, there aren't food sciences, nutritional sciences like there is today.
That's
And
right.
so it's taking what we've evolved to know and now applying that back to recovery.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so now here's what we made the decision is we could have kept going, we could have stayed open and been able to work with up to 12 people at a time. Or we can train these coaches, recovery coaches,
Mhm.
and we can affect millions. So our goal is in the next couple of years to train 1,000 coaches who each work with 1,000 people
Mhm.
and then we're over 1 million. And so the impact of that, we made a conscious decision to say, this can't die with us. And we're not retiring anytime soon. Like we can't imagine, because we feel
Right.
like we figured it out.
Yeah.
It was so successful. It would be super selfish for us to not continue to teach the next generations what we found
Mhm.
out.
Mhm. I agree with that. That's why I started my academy in 2015 to do exactly the same thing.
Right.
You're a little more, you're looking at all three legs of the stool, and
Right.
I'm pretty much in the academy focused just on the biochemical leg of the
Right.
stool, because that's the piece that's so missing in education
Right.
and treatment. But our goal is the same, is to train other people so that we have the ripple
Yeah.
effect,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
that more and more and more people can realize that not only is this effective, it's also common sense.
Mhm. Yeah, it's easy to implement. We wrote the book in such a way that anybody understands it. It's written,
Mhm.
the first part is talking all about the neuroscience and the brain and brain function. The latter part is actualized recovery, is actually 5 areas of the methodology for us, but it mirrors what you're talking about. So physiology is the first,
Mhm.
and psychology being the second. The third is spirit, and
Mhm.
looking at the spiritual aspect.
Like spirit.
4 is connections,
Uh,
and the fifth is lifestyle. So
sure.
tying all of those in and creating a lifestyle that is very unique to the individual, because not everybody is going to have the same results from the same
That,
protocols. So it
that's
has to be very, very um, tailored to the individual.
mhm.
But the principles then are all the same, right? You're still looking at the other 4. You're looking at the physical, you're looking at the psychology and the mind, and you're looking at the spirit, and you're looking at their connections. And there's
Right.
often, we say the physical first, and it is really important, but the next is really your connections, how you feel, how you're connected.
Period.
um, Well, we talked before we were recording on this. When you have challenges, you need other people.
Mhm.
That's where your hope comes from. So as Johann
Oh, it
Hari
really does.
talks
Yeah.
about in his book Connections, addiction, if you look at what the opposite of addiction is, it's connections.
It's connection.
Right,
Exactly. Exactly. And again, we have to have a well-functioning brain to have the energy for
right,
connection. I
right.
remember decades ago, I was very ill with undiagnosed celiac disease. And one
Yeah,
of the ways it showed up for me was profound fatigue.
yeah.
And I remember sitting at our cafeteria at school, and way on the other side of the room, these three girls came in and sat down in a booth. And these were girls I really wanted to get to know better. And I so wanted to get up and join
Mm,
them and socialize with them and build
yeah,
connection. And I literally did not have the physical energy to get
right,
up out of my chair, walk across the cafeteria and socialize with them.
right.
And when I
And so
finally,
that's, as I said earlier, it's not willpower and it's not character. It's
no,
brain power, right?
brain power.
Our success comes from the capacity of this beautiful 3-pound organ in between our ears and how well it's functioning.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
once I went off gluten, which for me was a very destructive food,
yeah,
and I started an upward spiral. And one of the first things that improved was my energy.
yeah,
It's like I felt alive for the first time in my life. And now that I felt alive, I could function, I could socialize, I could build relationships, and I could heal.
yeah, yeah. And so you bring about a great point, Christina, because when people don't understand the power of food until they understand that they may have a condition that is being affected by gluten or eggs or dairy or There's trigger foods that feed things that are going on in the body. And the thing to understand is your body never betrays you. If you're thinking that, or you're being told that your body is like autoimmune conditions have become the catch-all, but your body never turns on itself. So people that have been diagnosed with things like an autoimmune condition, we have to look at the source of what's happening, because the immune system never ever turns on us, but it's distracted when it isn't getting the proper nutrients, when it isn't getting the proper supplementation, when it isn't getting sleep, when it is overstressed. Then the immune system is only doing as well as it can, right? Like it's a superhero, it's a superpower.
That's
But
right.
it's when people are told that they have an autoimmune condition, I want to shed some light on that, because the immune system never turns on us. It's distracted fighting something else.
That's
And
right.
so you need to uncover what that is, and it's going to be lifestyle related. What is it that is distracting the immune system?
Well, I think it's going to be lifestyle related. It's
Mhm.
also can be emotion related,
Mhm.
because our own relationship with trauma, with emotions, with the ways we process life
Mhm.
impacts our physical being, impacts
Right,
our immune system, impacts our nervous system. It's
right,
this intricate dance,
right. But
and
it's never
also
turned on
impacts the
us.
way we feed ourselves.
Right. And what people found in our program too is they came with traumas and hurdy poos, but when they started to eat well and when they started to sleep, and this was unanimous, very few people didn't actually come out and say this, that, you know, that thing isn't really bothering me anymore. Like it happened and I remember, but I feel different. And so I think it goes back to what you said. When you raise the vibration and energy, and you do that through the lifestyle,
Hmm.
then you look at things very differently, that you may have said, this was a traumatic physical or emotional event. I'm stuck there. Well, what that means is that your nervous system is stuck.
That's right.
And so those memories continue to loop, or that feeling, and people talk about triggers. But when you change the lifestyle, and when you're able to impact the nervous system through nutrition and sleep and supplementation, you're refreshed. Like, think of it, when you get a great night's sleep,
Yes.
everybody says this. They say, oh, like I just feel like I could handle anything.
Uh-huh.
And that's
Uh-huh.
the same when your brain is being fed, when you have glucose stored as glycogen in the liver, so that when you're under stress, it releases like Netflix on demand, right? You have energy on demand, provided that you're eating things that are going to fill the glycogen in the liver and the brain.
That's
And
right.
so we have a lot of um, ideas and theories for food that aren't necessarily in our best interest, the way that the body was designed. And so you feel overwhelmed, or you feel like you have more stress. You feel like these triggers, I feel overwhelmed. And then when people in our program say by week 3, their energy levels were so much higher, the things that they were so focused on emotionally or as triggers before didn't factor in. It wasn't the same. It didn't hold the same energy anymore.
Well, this is why my motto is it's our brain's job to allow us to cope with stress gracefully.
Yeah.
Gracefully. And this can
Yes.
be any type of stress,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Trauma, physical stress, illness, whatever it is. It's our brain's job to allow us to cope with stress gracefully.
Right.
But to do that, it needs to be fed optimally.
Right.
Have you fed your brain today?
Right. And then I think it's a great beginning. And then you start looking at things at home. So if
Yeah,
you have plug-in air fresheners, if you have toxic cleaning chemicals, if you
that's
have
right.
things that have toxic heavy metals, all of those, they need to be examined, and your environment needs to be safe, right? So
It
we
does.
need to eliminate those things. So food's a great beginning point, and I think it's a major block on the, being able to build. It's a major building block. But then when your energy increases, now we've got to go to the next step and the next step. So your environment is so safe and so clean that the home is a sanctuary in so many ways, right? Physically and emotionally.
And so many people's homes are not safe.
Right.
I
But
mean,
they think they are.
they may not be safe physically or emotionally,
Right.
but they're also not safe environmentally.
Right.
And so we are exposed to, as you said, all these
Right.
toxins
Yeah.
that stress out our liver, that stress out our brains,
Yeah.
that create inflammation. And
Yeah.
we know that inflammation can create depression,
Yep.
inflammation can create anxiety. We know that all these toxins, whether they be heavy metals or pesticides
Mm-hmm.
or red dye number 3, which is about to get eliminated in the United States. Um,
Thank
right?
you, Bonnie Hari.
Finally,
Yeah.
that that these foods, I'm not going to call them foods, these chemicals
Right.
not only stress out the liver, but also stress out the brain. The
Mm-hmm.
brain has its own immune system. The brain creates its own inflammation in response
Mm-hmm.
to insult, in
I can,
response to these toxins and these enemies.
yeah.
And when the brain is doing that, and when the body is doing that, we end up feeling ill, physically ill, emotionally ill, spiritually ill.
Mm-hmm. I can give an example. So we moved into a new home October 31st of 2023. And
Mhm.
I am incredibly healthy. I am not your average. I turned 59 this year. My energy level is high. My skin's amazing. I'm a beast when I work out. I don't take any medications, nothing, right? Nothing.
Mhm.
And over time, I started to have a nervous system reaction. So it began when I would stand up and I would feel dizzy, and my ears would kind of buzz and so on. So as now it's winter time and we're in Canada, in Calgary, so the windows are closed.
Right.
We're not getting out as much. And my nervous system really started to react. And I started to have days on Mattress Island where I wasn't able, my energy level was so, so low. And I finally figured it out. It's all the off-gassing that was happening in our home. So we had, and ours is a very eco-friendly home. So they didn't use the glues that normally would on flooring. And there was a lot of things it's a very eco-friendly home. But it's all new, right? And the new
Right.
furnishings that we brought in or things like that. So as I started to just open the window and I really upped my protocols, then there's certain things that you can do to get rid of chemicals and toxins and, as you said, release it from the liver. So as I started to do that, my health completely returned. But I had to quadruple some of the supplementation that I take to help the liver release everything that was getting stored in there from these toxins.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And you knew what to do. And so
Hmm.
many people don't know what to do. So they go to their doctor
Right,
and say, Doctor, I'm having all these symptoms. Well, the doctor doesn't know how to
right,
interpret it
right,
because he or she are not trained in this detective work.
right,
So they do all your regular tests, and all the regular tests say, Oh, you're just fine.
right.
And they say, No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah,
And then they
I
send them to
know.
a psychiatrist
I
because
was
it's
far from fine.
depression.
Right.
Well, no, it's not. Or it actually could end up as depression because
Yeah,
depression is one of the symptoms that can be caused by these chemicals.
right,
But
right,
it's not that depression isn't the cause.
right, right. The symptoms, well, we could continue on for hours right now. Like I just feel like we're like, yeah, we're into it. And I'm looking forward to coming down to the conference. And the speech that I'm giving is the four kryptonites and ancient wisdom. So it's tapping back into that. So by the end of that talk, I hope I've given the people who are coming to that conference or seeing it online, I hope that they are going to have lots and lots of ideas of how the body works and what they can do when they have symptoms.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. Suze, thank you so much for being willing to speak at the conference. Thank you
Yeah, my
so
pleasure.
much for coming to this podcast. It's been fun.
A lot of fun. Like I said, Christina, you and I could talk for hours. We've known that because we've had conversations, you and I, over the past months. And when we get on, yeah, we could just talk all day long.
It's cool. Well, I'm glad we had this little sliver of time that we could share together and share with other people.
Me too.
So thank you so much. And
Yeah.
if you liked this podcast, if you enjoyed our conversation, please share it with other people and like us on YouTube or some of these other platforms. And I'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to Power Up Recovery with Nutrition. I'm Christina Veselak, your host, and I hope today's episode has inspired and equipped you with new insights and tools to support your recovery journey or practice. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who could benefit from the knowledge shared here. Stay connected with us for more episodes filled with practical advice, expert wisdom, and inspiring recovery stories. Remember, nutrition is a powerful tool in mental health and relapse prevention. Power up your recovery today. I'm Christina Veselak, and I'll see you next time.